All right. Well, thanks, Jim, for having us here. We're at the Gotham, and, we wanted to start off with asking you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about the story of the Gotham.
Well, you want the development story or the story about the building?
Honestly, both. I'm curious, how you
hear both of
found
them.
it, how you knew it was the right time to build it, and what that looked like.
So, I drove by this building. We're pretty far north now, right? Before we were really far north. So back in, I think it was the end of beginning of 2016, I had driven down 2nd Street and saw this building, and I was like, wow, that's nice.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that it came across my desk about 3 months later in a marketing packet. And, it was being marketed by a group. So I came over, I knew the broker, I called him up, and we talked about it a little bit, and he told me the price, and I thought the price was, way too high. And I was like, well, I'll still come take a look. So I came over for a walkthrough, and when I came down American, right? And at that time, American Street hadn't been revitalized yet.
Sure.
And it, the horrible, horrible street, if you guys remember it, prior to renovation.
Yeah.
And
That was our first question, to be honest, is we were like, now it's obvious. Like, obviously you're going to build here, but when you started building this, it was not obvious. So I'm like, how did you know?
And I came down American, and as I was driving this way, I see the building, but I'm coming, I'm like, wow, this is really far north. Because if you come down American from Girard, you're coming, you don't, it feels like it's pretty far away.
Yeah.
So I came around the building, and I parked in the lot, and I came in and I met with the owners, and I walked through the building, and the building was a gorgeous shell, 13-foot ceilings. They had cleared out one floor. It was a 10-story wicker warehouse, and not liquor, wicker, right? So, the furniture your grandmother used to buy,
right?
Which really isn't really done anymore. Now it's all poly products, that are weatherproof. Nobody really buys wicker anymore. So this thing, 10-story building filled with wicker duck baskets and wicker chaise lounges and wicker tables, and
my mom would have had a field day.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, I drove down and I walked through and I looked at it and went up to a clear floor, and I was like, this is a gorgeous building. You don't find buildings built like this, at least not that are available. Right. So loved the building. And I said, guys, I really appreciate it. I love the building. I said, I'll go back and take a look at it. And I left. Right. And I went back and I said, yeah, I'll run some numbers on it. But in my head, I'm like, it's too far north. It's nobody's going to want to live there, And so I kind of put it back burnered it. And I went back and we were building a couple projects over on Frankfurt Avenue, and we were having a brokers open that week. And it was the first time I was going, and the rooftops were open. They were doing this brokers open with an open bar, and grab a drink, walk up to the roof. I'm standing there, I turn around, and this building basically smacks me right in the face. And what I didn't get when I originally came here is it really is far north, but it's walking distance to Fishtown.
Yeah.
Like Front Street is right here. It's a block and a half away. The Berks L station is right there. The buildings we're doing, and I was doing projects on Frankfurt Avenue, and I'm like, well, why would I do here and not do here? And I turned around, and then I got this instant pit in my stomach, like, I need that building.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have let it go this long. And went back and, ran the numbers and then figured out, okay, well, if we, monetize the lot and build new construction, and then we have the stuff on the north, and we demo this garage and historic tax credits, and, it's a pretty complicated, financial structure and capital stack. But I got the numbers to work, and I went aggressive and came in basically at asking price, for the building. And then we took it through. It took, my goodness, the owners were two guys, and they owned it since the 1950s.
Wow.
And nice guys, but this was their retirement plan, right? And it took us, when I came back at ask, it was, I think, 3 or 4 people that offered, and I won it over those guys because they had trusted me that I can get the approvals done. At the time, I think I was the VP of the BIA at the time, right? So, or just becoming the president of the BIA at the time, and they figured I had the ability to get the zoning done, and I would follow through, and so they picked me out of the offers that were sitting.
Interesting. So it wasn't even like best terms necessarily in price. It was like you were able to execute.
I was right there, and they had to pick out of a group that
So
we're talking a $5 million plus purchase price, and we were all maybe $100,000 apart, right?
Got
so
you.
it was really like the numbers are the same. Who are we going to pick? Who's going to see this through? Who do we trust? And so I had a relationship with the broker, knew him for a while, and he basically said, like, this guy will close, and he'll get it done. If anybody can get it done, he'll get it done.
Was it hard to get financing for the building, being so far north, or was it hard to do that with?
Well, it wasn't very quick, right? So it took us, and a little quirk to the story was the sellers, the wife of the one seller was an attorney for an insurance company, and she decided she wanted to represent them on the seller side. So
sounds like a headache.
Right. So it took us like 3 days to get a signed LOI. Right.
Okay.
Which is an LOI.
Right. Which is the LOI. Right. But that lays out the format for the agreement of sale. Right. So I had my attorney draft an agreement of sale. We send it in. It took her 2 weeks to mark it up. Okay. And there was so much red ink on the paperwork, it was unbelievable. So it took us like 2 months, 3 months, I think it was, to get through an agreement of sale.
So you guys verbally agreed, and then it took you 3 months to actually have a signed agreement.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it was crazy. And then we basically got through everything, and we were done. And she said, it was a Friday, she said, all right, I think we're good. I want to take the weekend and look it over again. And it came back Monday with it must have been 100 new revisions.
Wow.
So it literally took us 3 days to sign an LOI.
Yeah.
And I think 4 months to get a signed agreement of sale.
Crazy.
So I was working through the due diligence while we were trying to sign this agreement and working with lenders and trying to get close. So, at the time it was tough, to try to convince a lender because there were no comps. There were no comps up here at the time. And this was the middle of 2016. It took us till the end almost of 2018. It took us a year and a half to get through signing the agreement of sale, zoning, everything else. And in that time, they announced the revitalization project for American Street. They closed down which I guess it was a recycling yard, but it was essentially like a landfill that was right here with machines running and trucks dumping all day long. That got shut down. So while we were in agreement, things started to happen.
It became a really smart deal.
Yeah.
Right. And then,
so that was going to be my next question is, with a project like this, there's so many variables that are in play. So how much due diligence and how much of like a feasibility study do you have to do before you actually close?
Well,
2 years is a lot of time, right? It's like what happens in those 2 years.
But in that time period, we took it through. We got it on the National Register for Historic Places. It wasn't a historic building.
So that's the tax credit.
That's
that
the
you
tax
mentioned.
credits, right? So you get 20% of what you invest in the building in a tax credit. So we were getting,
Is that hard to get done?
It's a lot of red tape. And I mean, the building has to qualify, right? But this building was built in 1922, and it was the Gotham Silk Hosiery Factory.
It's also a beautiful building, like these huge windows and everything. Like from the outside, you look at it, and it's just
great,
like,
But we were lucky because it was a clean shell on the inside. So a lot of with a historic building, with a National Historic Building, you have to refurbish the outside, to what it was before, and you need a certain spec on the windows, you need everything else, but you also need to be mindful of what's inside the building. So
I've always heard from people kind of nightmare stories with historic construction because it's so much more difficult because of the things that you mentioned. But did you do I guess you could say, a feasibility study beforehand to make sure that the tax credit would be more worth it rather than the delta in what you would spend extra on doing construction for historic?
Yeah, well, for a big building like this, I mean, we were talking like a $14 million renovation to the building, right, at 20%. So you're talking about a $2.8 million tax credit.
Nice, got it.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you want to view it that way, you set that
Yeah.
off against the purchase price, and that's your net price, right? And then if
Makes
your
sense.
construction cost goes up 10%, it goes up 10%,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
But
Yeah.
we had already baked those numbers in,
Right.
assuming we were going to do a historic renovation. So
And
you
that
know,
was all
they-
contingent in the contract.
it
Like
was not contingent in the contract.
Oh, wow.
But,
So it was going to work for you either way.
that was we were pretty sure within 30 to 60 days after you submit, pretty much if you're going to get it or not. You get, they say yes, initial yes. There's still a lot of steps that have to go through. There's part 1, part 2, but you get that initial yes. Then it's just, okay, we have to develop a plan that's going to meet their approval. And because this was just clear space inside, it's easier than it is with other things. Like we had a historic firehouse that we tried to do the same thing with, but they wanted us to maintain all the demising walls where they were, and it was all these small rooms, and it just wasn't feasible. The roof was
Kind of
falling
blew up
in.
your plans,
Right,
basically.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it just, at that point, it wasn't worth it. We couldn't do what they said, so that we had to walk away from those credits and from that historic piece of it, right? So, we still ended up doing a historic renovation on that building. We just didn't get tax credits for it because we couldn't maintain the interior separations like they wanted.
Makes
With a
sense.
building like this, we had basically a floor plate that was,
Just wide open.
7,000 square feet of just wide open space with columns running down the middle.
That's really cool.
That's easier
Yeah.
than otherwise. But, to answer your question, we were comping against other projects that were on Front Street and, within a mile, right? So we got the belief, and we cut down rents underneath where they were, for the comps, and the numbers worked. So, it worked as long as we could get the zoning approvals we needed, which was, and our deal was contingent on zoning. It wasn't contingent on historic. But then we got the 18 new construction apartments, the coffee shop, 12 townhomes, all approved, and 50 parking spaces approved for the south, right? And, that was important. The neighborhood was really pushing. They wanted more commercial space, which is really difficult to lease in this market. You have all of 2nd Street with storefronts all the way down that are shuttered, and, the roll down gates are closed.
So that was kind of part of the value prop.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like doing projects like this is just like a huge undertaking, but it, from your website, it also looks like, if I'm not mistaken, you guys also put a heavy emphasis on like green roof construction. Is that like a major part of the business as well? How does that kind of look like? And can you kind of tell us just how that works?
Sure. There for a while, eBuilt is our construction arm, right? And eBuilt was a GC. We built our own projects, and then we also did third-party GC work, and we also did green roofs and some other sustainable buildings, porous paving and pavers and rain gardens, things like that, but mostly green roofs. And then we gave up third-party GC work,
Okay.
because that is like basically a full-time commitment on its own. And what I was finding out was that it was monopolizing all my time, was getting focused on other people's projects, and my projects were falling. My priorities are really my project first.
Yeah.
But in reality, what was happening was that it was getting shuffled, and everybody else's priorities were coming before mine, and I wasn't able to have the bandwidth and the time to find new projects and work on things like I wanted to. So we gave up the third-party GC work, and now we build our own projects and we do green roofs.
How does the green roof technology work? We were kind of curious on that, like. And what was like kind of the inspiration behind that? Because there's not a ton of people doing that in the city.
No, I mean, back in, I had started my ice house project back in like 2004, 2005. I started designing it, and prior to going into real estate development, I worked I did best case scenario analysis for electric companies on how to most efficiently run their power plant. So I was already in energy efficiency, right?
Oh, cool.
And so when I got into development, I wanted to integrate some of that, and I was intrigued by LEED certification and green roofs and other things. And, I just didn't understand how people are doing like projects. Like you do a building with a 10,000 square foot footprint, so you have a 10,000 square foot roof, and they're putting mechanical equipment up there, and that's it, and they're not using it. And some people put a stair up there and then throw a deck on top, and they call that an amenity space. But to me, the rooftop was the most underutilized asset in the urban market, right? And if in most of the zoning here, you have is 80% coverage, 90% coverage. There's no room for like a nice rear yard,
right?
Because most of
people cement over it anyway,
right?
Yeah.
Yes, and it's postage stamps, right? That's what you have when you buy a parcel. You have a building, it's taking up almost many times 100% of the lot, right? And especially existing buildings, And now our building, we have a great view from the roof and beautiful city view, and so. I started to get interested I started learning about green roofs. Then I went in 2007, I basically went around the country. The USGBC, the Green Building Council, put out the first accreditation exam for green roof professionals. So you had to take 5 courses and then sit for an exam. So I wanted to do it as fast as I could. So I flew. I went to Pittsburgh, I went to Atlanta, I went to California, and I flew around because there was course 101, 201, 314, and they were different locations. So I flew right around and got them all done. And then I flew down to Atlanta to sit for the first exam. So I technically became one of the first, certified green roof professionals in the United States. And then when I came back.
Is that because you understand how to install it?
Well, that's
where the certification comes from?
Yes, you learn everything. You learn why, how, the technical.
The why was what I was interested in. Is it's good for the environment, I'm assuming. Is it just because of the oxygen production? It's
stormwater management more than anything.
Oh,
okay,
interesting.
Right. So Philadelphia, the stormwater systems are hundreds of years old. And a lot of these are brick sewers, right? So when you flush a toilet, it goes out into a sewer. And Philadelphia has, I think 1 million miles of combined sewer system, which means that the septic goes into the same sewer that the stormwater goes into. Right, and it all flows away and goes to the plants or wherever it goes, right? But the problem is that it becomes a health issue because when you are running septic through this thing, and then you get these large storms that come in and overwhelm this combined sewer system, you might have 2 inches of septic water in there, but then and it might be 6 foot high, but now you get a big storm that comes in, you get a 3-inch rain. From a hurricane or something, it comes in, everything floods.
Overwhelms it, yeah.
It overwhelms it, and then it floods up out of that, goes into basements, that's watered down sewage because it's a combined sewer system. So that's why PWD has this huge mandate on stormwater management, right? So any parcel over 15,000 square feet has mandatory stormwater management. So you have to control the first inch of rain that hits that parcel. But on a building that's 10,000 square feet or a parcel that's 10,000 square feet, there's no mandatory stormwater management. So when you install a green roof on top of a building, it handles the stormwater management. That's its number one goal. Okay, is that you're essentially
that's got to be pretty heavy, right? Like if it's holding all of that water, is there extra engineering and framing that needs to go into?
There is, but it's not obsessed. It's not over the top. So it's not.
One of my first questions, I guess, is, and this is kind of a selfish reason for asking this. Let's say that you were consulting me on my first green roof. What would you make sure that I'm aware of before I start that process?
Typically, it starts with a civil engineer, right? And your structural engineer. And you make sure that you have to hold, I think it's 100 pounds. If it's a non-occupiable green roof, it's like 60 pounds a foot.
So you're involved during the architectural phase?
Not really. Like if the architect if it's fully a designed building and then they want to go and put a green roof on it and it wasn't designed for that, then it goes back to the structural engineer and says, okay, here's the load requirements. We send them the load requirements. Okay, we're going to do a 4-inch. PWD says you need a 4-inch build up. Here's what it is. Here's what the weight per square foot is when it's fully saturated.
So it's a couple minimal tweaks.
Right, it's not a lot. So say you're in a 2x12 for your roof joist, you might have to go to a TJI. Say you're in a lower level TJI, a 240 or something, you might have to bump up to a 560 or so. So there is incremental differences, but it's not anything that you probably won't even notice it in. You don't have to change your walls from 2x6 to 2x10 or anything like that. The walls stay the same. It's basically just your roof joists and your loading.
So most of the cost is just going to come from the green roof itself.
Correct.
So how do you even price out something like that?
It's pretty standard, now that, costs are, good numbers, $15 a square foot, right? But now with the green roof density bonus and the green roof tax credit, what you get back is much greater than the cost.
Wow.
You know,
So you say 15 a square foot. Is that the space that you're installing the green roof
Yes.
on, or is that your entire roof?
No, that would just be your green roof.
So if I have a 10,000 square foot lot and I'm building at 75% lot coverage, my roof, let's say, is going to be 7,500 square feet, and I'm installing. Do you have to do a green roof on X amount percent?
60%.
60% if you're going to take advantage of the bonus.
Yeah.
The density
So let's say
bonus?
it ends up being 5,000 square feet and it's $15. You're $65,000 for your green roof, right? But now you get a density bonus, so you get 25% of, additional units. So if you were by, zoning code allowed to have 20 units, okay? Now you can do 25% more. So now you can do 25 units, right?
Home run.
So, it's within the same box, right? So you're not getting extra buildable space. But with the Philadelphia zoning code, it breaks down that you'd end up with units that are like your 2-bedroom units will be 1,500 square feet. And your 1-bedroom units will be 1,000 square feet because you're allowed to build so many square feet, but with the number of units you have, it breaks down to these big units. And nobody wants those big units anymore.
That's kind of a waste.
Right. Nobody wants a 1,500 square foot 2-bedroom unit anymore. They want 1,000 square feet, right? Because you pay for the square footage. So somebody wants a 2-bedroom unit and it's 1,000 square feet at $2 a square foot, their rent's $2,000 a month. But if they take a 1,500 square foot unit, their rent's now $3,000 a month. But they still have a 2-bedroom unit. So it's you and a roommate. Would you rather pay $1,000 a month each or $1,500 a month each? Right. So what happens now is that allows you to right size your units, and you end up with the same square footage, but with smaller units. And what happens is that as units grow, your dollars per square foot goes down. It gets watered down, right? So you see that in your performance. Like a studio might be $3 a foot, a 1-bedroom might be $280 a foot, a 2-bedroom $225 a foot. So as the units grow, your dollar per square foot goes down. So if you can do more units, right, you're gonna end up with smaller units and you get more dollars per square foot. So if you're 10,000 square feet and your average rent's $250 a square foot versus $225 a square foot, you're getting a lot more income out of the same building.
You can build a more efficient building, what
Correct.
you're saying, basically.
Yes.
Because if in a 10,000 square foot unit you have 5 2,000 square foot units, you're not
Right.
going to make as much rent as
Correct.
10 1,000.
Right. So that density bonus. Right.
So your building's not bigger. You just get extra density. And
Correct.
Could you remind me of the zoning code? I think RM1 it's times 1.25 and CMX 2.5 it's like 360 a unit. Is that the density bonus for green roof? Do you know off the top of your
I
head?
don't know off the top of my head, but typically it's 25% additional units.
Okay.
Right. So no extra height, no extra footprint or size, but extra units. Right. So 25%. So, if you look at it from a study, and I did a study on this, I would do this presentation for the BIA and for in green building, symposiums and stuff, is that if you look at that number and you're spending $65,000 to put a green roof on, but you're getting a 25% density bonus, and then you look at the increase in rent, and then you take that increase in rent by a cap rate and look at what the overall value of your building increase was, that $65,000 investment, can yield, an $800,000, $1 million improvement in building value.
Wow.
Because of the increase in rent per square foot.
So you're obviously an expert in green roof. How much of that now is part of your business, and then how much of it is development? Like, where's the balance there?
It's really two different arms of our business.
Yeah.
So I focus on the development side of things. We have a green roof division that I help with business development. And a lot of times it's developers and builders, and they get referred by civil engineers. We get a lot of referrals and a lot of, developer referrals to one another, and then I'll get the call and I'll discuss it with the person. We'll run through the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah,
and
I just referred you Kyle Earthman 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you made the connection, but that was me.
Okay. So then I kick it over to the green roof team. They do an estimate. We send it over to them. If they want to VE it in any way, then we'll look at different options of, okay, how could we, reduce the cost, or, and then it goes, and then, they put it into their plans, they get permitted, and then, the building goes up, and we go and we install the green roof.
So we hear time and time again from developers, the classic battle that they have is managing short-term cash flow that's needed for running their business and what got us all into real estate, which is the long-term wealth building aspect of owning buildings like the Gotham.
Right.
Did you start the green roof construction company with the intention of solving the short-term cash flow and freeing you up to be able to focus on the development projects?
You know, it wasn't as much for the cash flow, but that is part of it, and that's a great question.
Well, and my follow-up is going to be, how do you manage that, right?
Yeah.
Like the short-term versus the long-term.
Right, and that's a great question. That's one of the best questions I've heard in a long time. I saw that when you guys sent over some questions. I was like, that's a great question.
Because I want to know, because I'm not doing a good job at it with our company.
Right. You know, over the years, in my early years as a developer, I looked and I saw the guys that are developing, and there was a common thread with guys that I thought were successful. And there was really two different types. There's the typical developer who does the GP/LP thing, right? Where they go out and find a project and they keep 30% of it, and they go and they raise capital, and then they bring the guys in, and they might get a GP fee, and then they go and build the development and all that stuff. That's great. But if you're going to run a development project like a development company like that, and that's your model, you got to make sure that your pipeline is full at all times, because you can't have a gap because there is no revenue during that gap. Right, so
your expenses don't stop, and the only way you're making money is by buying new projects.
Exactly. So a lot of these guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these guys have to. I'd like to be selective in my development projects. Other guys have to feed the fire,
Feed the beast, yeah.
You know, and so they have to always make sure, like, okay, 2 years out, I got, I don't have any projects. I have this, so they're running around trying to buy up stuff that may or may not work. Right? It may just be a gigantic exercise that has no profit at the end, right? It might be a break-even scenario at the end, but they have to pay their employees and keep things moving, so they have to always be filling their pipeline. I don't want to do that. I want to be selective and do good projects, and the projects that I have a passion for, not just ones that are going to pay the bills. So the guys that are using that model, I see, are guys that are either in a trade or they have some type of other income flow. Right? Maybe they have a plumbing company. Maybe they're framers. Maybe they're masonry guys, and then you see these guys and they're out there and they're in the field, and then they also get wind of deals, right? So when we started doing third-party GC work, right? And that was our flow. And the green roof was like a little side thing that we did, right? And at the time, that's what all it could be, because the demand for green roofs wasn't that great that it could be like a full-time business, right? Now, over the years, now it's basically, the MO for a lot of developers. Almost every developer looks at every project and says, okay, green roof. They give it to their attorney, their zoning attorney, and say, run me a feasibility study on this and use the green roof density bonus, right? And they come back and they tell you, okay, you can build this or you can build this. And, so now we have, we probably are doing hundreds of thousands of square feet of green roof a year. Right.
Wow.
Well, before, we were lucky if we had one or two green roof jobs, and in 2008 to 2012, maybe we did one green roof job a year that wasn't our own.
So
right.
you didn't necessarily start it with the intention of it being what it is now.
Correct.
And then now it grew to what it is, and it sort of freed you up to be able to
even more selective. Yeah.
Right. Correct. And that's when I also was able to drop the GC arm. Was that, okay, I'm no longer going to do third-party GC work.
I'm laughing because everyone is like in a race to stop doing third-party GC work.
It has to be one of the toughest jobs.
Yeah, for sure.
Essentially,
we just started it, so that's why I'm over here. I'm like another one. It's like,
listen, if your passion's there and you can do it, that's great. It's just, a lot of times the GC is there and just becomes the brunt of all the issues for a project.
It takes up a majority of our time, without a doubt.
Yeah,
for sure.
And you've become the place to play, where people are going to place blame. It's the GC's fault. Everything's GC, even if it was designed wrong or, prices escalated. I couldn't imagine being in the middle of third-party GC work when this whole COVID
price
hit,
of lumber doubles, and it's like, sorry, here's a
exactly. And you're locked in,
Yeah.
You're locked into a thing, and maybe you had the foresight to put escalation clauses in and everything else, but a lot of times you don't. You have a lump sum contract. I got to build this building for $5 million. Now every single sub's coming to me with a escalation change order. What am I doing? You know? And then you better hope that you're a good GC and you have a good relationship with your clients, because then you work through it together and they're not unrealistic, right? And they're not, but sometimes that's not the case.
You really have to look at it like a partnership, because too many things change throughout the course of a project to be able to identify every single variable on the front end and guess it correctly.
Yeah.
Like budgets just
Exactly.
get thrown out the window.
Yeah.
So,
Left and
Brutal.
right.
I mean,
so I do want to be respectful of our time because I know you got to run. We do want to ask like one last question. We ask everybody we interviewed so far, if your entire network and all of your assets were taken from you, how would you restart today in Philadelphia?
do I know everything I know now?
You know everything you know now, but no network,
No network. So
no assets.
Like you're transported to another universe, an Elon Musk type question, and
Right.
it's just you have all of your knowledge and experience, but totally new network. You're starting in Philly, fresh, no money.
It's such a tough question. It's good because for me to lose my network, I'd have to alienate a lot of people. Hindsight is 20/20, so I try not to live in that world.
Sure.
Of
Fair enough.
going back and being like, if I knew then what I know now, I'd be so much further ahead. But that's the same case with all of us.
Mm-hmm.
I still love designing buildings, and bringing something, from what it was to what it is. And, it's always exciting when the building first gets framed up and, you're walking through it. I would go back and do a lot of what I've done now, and not saying I've done it perfectly, and I haven't by far. I made a ton of mistakes but that's how you get to where you are, right? Is you make a mistake. Hopefully you make it once, you learn from it, you get smarter, and then you don't make that mistake again, and you continue to build and move forward. It's tough. Early on in my career, I moved a lot slower than I should have because I was very tight with my percentage ownership, and I wanted to do projects on my own and be 100% owner, 100% in control, and be able to do it my way without others telling me what to do. Okay, because a lot of stuff, you think about it, go back 15 years and say, oh yeah, I'm going to basically build this building with a yard on the roof. People look at like you're insane, right? You're totally insane, and I didn't want everybody telling me what to do. So I had struggled moving from project to project, and I moved slowly because I didn't have enough personal capital to get it done. So I would have to finish something to bring in the capital to start something else to move, instead of going and taking on investment capital and starting from there. So I guess if I was started again without a network and without my own capital, I would do that. I would take on more investment and move faster and really just be, a stronger foothold in what I believe in, and lay it out from the start. Say, I'm the decision maker, I'm in charge, it's your money, but we're doing it my way. If you don't like it, then you're going to have to find another investment.
So you'd network to find money, and then you would control the project, and you would have people invest in the project, give up some ownership, and be able to just build the cool projects from the start.
Yes.
Cool.
Makes sense. At the risk of being greedy, one more quick question. What are your predictions for 2023 real estate market and beyond? In Philadelphia specifically is what I'm most interested in.
Well, I'll give you my predictions based off of what I would like to see happen, because
good.
nobody knows what's going to happen.
Like it.
right?
Optimism.
The market has to slow down. Prices have to come back in line, right?
Like an actual correction where they're
There
not
had-
just not increasing anymore, but they're going to drop.
It has to fall back,
Yeah.
right? Because we're at
To
unsustainable
like
levels.
pre-2020 levels, you think? I mean,
No, I'm not talking pre, but like you go to build a multifamily building now and you're spending $225 a square foot. Like 5 years ago that was $150. Like it's just escalated, and COVID had a lot to do with it, and scarcity and shortage of labor, and But now interest rates are so high, people have to pull back. The projects don't pencil, so there has to be a slowdown, right? You don't see it right now because all of these projects were in the works and had their financing committed, and you're at a point of no return that you have to go and finish, right? But now are you pulling the trigger on new projects right now? And with construction loans, it's 7.5%, 8%, and that doesn't even really hurt that much. What hurts is that when you do your projection and say, I'm finished in 2 years, I'm going to put my perm loan on this, and when you put that 7.5% in as your perm interest rate, and your debt coverage ratio drops from 1.2 down to 0.9,
you got to go to 60% leverage.
right? And you got to say, okay, well, I need 40% equity to get this project done, and then you got to give away 80% of your project to do that. You're just like, whoa,
Yeah.
You know, so the way it is right now with interest rates and costs, I don't see how it can sustain being this crazy, right? So I think that what needs to happen and what most likely will happen is that as we get through this year, you'll start to see it slow down. I expect it to push into 2024, that the slowdown would stay through 2024 and maybe in the middle of 2024 when we don't longer see this consumer price index going up, it's been coming down. And a lot of this right now and the escalation that we've seen is some of it is result of COVID, but a lot of it is just, price fixing. Right, it's guys that everybody's raising prices, so we are too, even though their costs haven't gone up that much. So, but when people slow down and then they don't have 6 months of a backlog of work, then they'll cut their price because they need to
Out of
work.
necessity.
And when there's all these contractors and less projects, it gets more competitive, and then guys will hit budgets and bid, and so we need to get that cost of construction back down.
So you're thinking labor market even is going to come back down.
Labor is the one thing.
Can
People need to make a certain amount of money to live. So
Right, of course.
you have to be respectful of that. And everybody's trying to feed their families. And guys that work in the construction industry are good, hardworking guys. So I don't like to see that. I'd rather see the large companies, other suppliers, like lumber needs to come back down. We could drop the Canadian tariffs on lumber, and that would, in a week, that would reset the lumber market, right?
Yeah.
And so that would bring prices down. All the stuff with COVID, the backlogs burns off, and prices come back into shape. And I think that happens, and then real estate, interest rates drop after it let down. Then you'll see this level out, and then you start to see it rebuild from there.
So to end, could I kind of try to summarize what you're saying is
Sure.
basically like inflated debt markets are going to cause developers to take a second and pause on new acquisitions. The current stuff that's in production is going to run out since people haven't been buying as much. Then, you're going to start to see suppliers hopefully bring their prices down so that people can start penciling deals out now with lower costs of construction.
Right.
But during that time, the real estate market's going to kind of bottom for a short period of time. And in a reaction to that, the debt markets are going to drop again.
Yeah, well, I think the debt markets dropping are more to do with overall inflation than what's happening. I think that, I don't think the real estate market drives interest rates. It's the opposite. The interest rates drive the real estate market, right? So when
you're
the
just
rest
saying
of the world
inflation is gonna be
normalizes,
back down.
right,
Gotcha.
right. When inflation
Right,
stops
okay.
and consumer price index levels off and even drops a little bit, then the Fed will take the foot off the gas pedal and maybe start doing some steady reduction. And when you talk to mortgage lenders and brokers, they talk about,
Once they get to that 2%.
right, they see,
Soft landing.
people getting back into the, us getting back into the mid fives, into a normal type interest rate by
And
the middle
leveling
of
around there.
2024. So
Yeah.
if that happens, I think the world will be good. If we go into an extended recession, and prices don't come back down, but if building stops and building slows, how can prices not drop? Right, construction costs have to go down because
Right.
it's just supply and demand and it's competition. So
Totally. Makes sense. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
This
we
is
really
awesome.
appreciate this, Jim.
Yeah.
This was excellent. Really thank you for coming out.
Yeah, we might bother you for a second round because I could definitely talk to you more. But
Yeah,
I
no,
appreciate the
let me
time
know
that
if
you gave
I-
us
yeah,
today. Awesome.
Sounds
this was
good.
great, and we can do a part 2 if you guys want
Awesome.
to.
That sounds good.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.